All right, hello and welcome to A Cup of Coffee. I am Jake Brown here with Duncan Irvine. It is our first episode. And you know what? Like 2,000 plus miles away, we're still able to do this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of both of our ideas. We've been talking about doing a podcast for about a year. We finally got something going on. So, Cup of Coffee is all about Pacific Northwest sports. So, we cover everything in Vancouver, Seattle, Oregon, and Idaho. So, let's get this thing started. So, Seahawks are playing Monday Night Football and against the Saints. And the Saints are favored by 4.5. So let's run down. Duncan, you had a lot of notes regarding the Seahawks, but mostly negative. But I want to hear
It's,
what you want to talk
it
about.
tends to be my general opinion of the Seahawks. As much as I love them, I can't stand them most of the time. But so I'm going into this game not really sure how to feel. I went into Sunday night's game against the Steelers. I think I was one of very few Seahawks fans who actually thought we were going to win that game. And I kind of look at this game in a really similar fashion. It's like, say what you want about Jameis, but he's definitely not the best quarterback in the world. I am afraid that the Seahawks are going to make him look like that, though, just because that is what we tend to do. But I'd kind of say my biggest points are that I'm not sure what the offense is going to look like because what we did last week didn't work. I'm not sure what needs to be changed to make it look better this time. Like I said, I have concerns about the defense still, even though the Saints team is weaker than kind of what a lot of people expected coming into this year. But those are kind of the two things that I'm going to be looking at.
Yeah, and Bobby Wagner, I saw I think yesterday, he was talking to reporters and said that, hey, the 2015 team started out 2-4, and basically compared this team's start to the 2015 year start. What do you think of that?
Yeah, so I saw a tweet about that actually. Now that you say that, and I think the top comment underneath it was like, "Well, the 2015 team also had the best defense in the league and the fifth best offense." And I mean, this team, I think it's dangerous to be comparing them to 2015 just because um this defense is not good. Like I don't know if there's any better way to put it other than it's just kind of disrespectful to the 2015 team in my opinion to even compare yourself to that team. But yeah, I don't think I'm hoping it's accurate, but I don't have faith in that statement.
Yeah, and I agree that it's dangerous to compare a current team to one of the best defenses in NFL history when you have one of the worst defenses in the NFL right now. And even though the Seahawks finally pulled the plug on Trey Flowers, there's another Trey coming in, Trey Brown, that's going to start getting more starts in the Seahawks secondary.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, from what I saw on Sunday, I was really impressed. I didn't think much of him just because coming out of college when we drafted him, I wasn't really familiar with him. And I thought of all the options available, Stephon Gilmore, even last year was kind of rumored in trade talks, and guys like him, I was a little bit upset that this is how we're going about solving the clear need at cornerback. But I'm really looking forward to seeing him get back out there. I think he had a solid start last Sunday, and hopefully he can follow it up on Monday.
Yeah, because the Seahawks so far this year, they've been really disappointing in primetime games when primetime is really the time that the Seahawks really shine. They kind of laid an egg against the Rams a couple weeks ago, and then they started out slow against the Steelers last week. So it'll be really interesting to see what they do against the Saints this Monday in their first Monday night game this year. Because the Saints, in my opinion, they're not like the Drew Brees Saints. They're not like there's nothing really flashy about them,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. Not to say that they're not a good team, but they just don't look like a playoff team right now. But neither do the Seahawks.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like in a lot of ways they're really similar in that they kind of have a quarterback who's all over the place. Well, now that Gino's playing, we both have a quarterback who's kind of all over the place. They have a lot of different pieces that have yet to really kind of fit together, but there's definitely talent there.
And I think when in regards to the Seahawks defense, when I think the loss of KJ Wright really affected the team. Like, even though like KJ Wright is a 10, 11-year veteran, it's still like that veteran presence is important. And especially with how good KJ has been in Seattle. And I think there's kind of some loss in that in the with the defensive tackles and the pass rushers.
Yeah, I think there's a real argument to be made that he was Seattle's best defensive player kind of for most of the year last year. At least it seemed like he had the biggest impact out of all the defenders, because Bobby Wagner, obviously a great player, but he's not really making the flashy plays. There was a bunch of times last year where I remember where KJ would just come up with the whatever we needed. He seemed to be able to get that. So that was my biggest concern going into this offseason was how we were going to address that, because it seemed like the team kind of knew he wasn't going to be brought back. He kind of knew he wasn't going to be brought back. So I would agree that it's been really unfortunate to see this defense without him.
And I'm worried about Bobby Wagner because he's the guy who's kind of been carrying this defense in that middle linebacker spot. I remember a few weeks ago against the Titans, he had 20 tackles. And while that's very impressive, you don't want your veteran middle linebacker to be making every single play. Like, even though it's Bobby Wagner, do you want the other guys to be making plays? Like, it's not like there aren't terrible players on the Seahawks team with Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs in those safety spots, but it just seems like they don't have an identity right now.
I would agree. It seems to be kind of all over the place. They've been dropping defensive linemen back into coverage this year, which is not something we've really seen. I just think it's they need to figure themselves out sooner rather than later, because they're running out of time. As stacked as this NFC West is, there's not much room for error. So they're already kind of in trouble and need to figure something out quickly.
Yeah, and I think we should move over to the offense. Geno Smith is going to get another start. And there's some uncertainty with Alex Collins following his 100-plus yard rushing game. And there were many who say, hey, Alex Collins should be the next starter for Seattle in the running game. And now he's might not be able to make next or this Monday's start. And Chris Carson is out again. So now we got DJ Dallas and Travis Homer in that backfield.
Yeah, both those guys I'm not really sure that I trust them to be starters, definitely. Both the team kind of drafted these guys looking at them as special teams players. Homer's been returning kicks. Dallas has done a little bit of that. I don't think they ever intended it to get to this point. Obviously, if you have your former first-round pick, Rashad Penny, back now, it's a different conversation, but he's still injured as always. So, and I think when you have a quarterback like Geno, who is obviously not the most sure-handed guy, having a run game is really important. And when you have Travis Homer and DJ Dallas as your best options, that's a bit of a concern.
Yeah, and it's not like Dallas and Homer aren't good players in their own right. It's just like I don't like them as starters. I think they're great special teamers. It just seems like, again, like the offense doesn't have an identity either. The Seahawks in themselves, I think in general, you could say don't have an identity, especially when Russell Wilson is out, who's been carrying this team for the past 3 or 4 years.
I mean, to that point, even when he has been playing, it feels like this team really hasn't had an identity. They've kind of, last year they were the team that you could count on for close to 100 rushing yards per game, coming out and winning the game in whatever crazy fashion. It's kind of been all over the place this year. There hasn't really been any type of consistency from game to game.
Yeah, and we can point back to the LA Rams game, the Thursday night game, when Geno Smith came in and they were looking for that final drive to score, and he immediately throws a pick, literally right after the Seahawks picks the Rams off.
I feel like that play kind of summarizes the season so far pretty well. Kind of you think something's going great, and then nope.
Yep. And then the following week, Gino fumbles the ball to ice the game.
Yeah, that was rough to say the least.
It just like obviously Geno Smith is not going to be Russell Wilson, and I'm not expecting him to be Russell Wilson. He just there's just some very, very like he's a lot better than he was with the Jets, but that's because he's been under Russell Wilson's leadership for the past couple of years. Um, he just isn't that clutch player. And I know it's hard to measure clutch. I know statisticians and analysts don't like to use that word, but I think when you compare Russell Wilson and Geno Smith, like obviously Russell Wilson, they're similar play styles, but Russell Wilson is able to get the job done while Geno Smith doesn't.
Yeah, yeah, you kind of said it perfectly.
All right.
This team is not going to be able to. Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say that if he keeps making the same type of mistakes, like you said though, I'm not asking him to be Russell Wilson. I'm just asking him to be better. But the team is not good enough to win if he keeps playing like he has been.
Yeah, and you can say that again with every Seahawks player who has had to come in and replace a very good player. Like Flowers was replacing Sherman, and there was all that pressure on him, and he ended up being one of the worst cornerbacks I've ever seen play. Good luck, Cincinnati. I'm sorry for you. But let's move on from Seattle to Pullman with Nick Rolovich being fired for not complying with COVID-19, the vaccine mandate in Washington State. So all Washington State government employees, including their head coaching jobs in both UW and Wazoo, they have to get the COVID vaccine, and Nick Rolovich decided not to, and he got fired, and now he's suing Washington State for wrongful termination.
Yeah, I mean, whether you like it or not, he didn't listen to what his superiors had to say. So you have to expect repercussions in some way, shape, or form. He's passing up on close to $3 million a year, which is just insane to me that he's made this decision, but I guess to each his own.
Yeah, I guess so. Because I mean, Nick Rolovich wasn't even that great of a coach to begin with. And he also had to replace Mike Leach, who is probably the best coach Washington State has had in the past decade, since probably their mid 2000s run in the Pac-12 North. But Nick Rolovich has a civil rights lawsuit against him as well. So there's not like he's really in some deep, deep crap right now. So in case you don't know, there's a civil rights lawsuit against him based on how he cut one of their players. I'm blanking on his name at the moment, but this Washington State player was worried about the COVID vaccine mandate and was worried about how like Nick Rolovich wasn't really promoting it and wanting his players to get it. And this player also started the Black Student Union at Washington State, and now he got cut and he's transferred into, I think, Colorado State, a school in Colorado. And this player, he was heavily recruited by Mike Leach. He wasn't even recruited by Rolovich. So that's, that has to suck.
Yeah, I mean, back to Rolovich, if he doesn't want the vaccine, okay, whatever, that's his personal choice. But for him to be telling his players who really aren't even his players to not be getting it, that's kind of crossing a line there.
Yeah. And like, as a head coach for these I say super young, but I'm older than a lot of them. But for these players, like some of them are looking for a father figure in head coaching in football, and when Rolovich treats them not well, like why do you go to Washington State in the first place to play football?
Hmm.
Because Washington State used to be a very big powerhouse in the 90s and 2000s, and now they're just kind of the joke of the Pac-12 North.
Yeah, I was gonna say even, I mean, looking at their schedule now, even if Rolovich did get vaccinated, I'm not sure that he comes back next season because I just don't see. They're currently 4-3, but I don't know that I see. I mean, they play Arizona. We'll get to them in a little bit, but I don't know that I see too many more wins left on the schedule.
Yeah, and the Cougars are facing the BYU Cougars this weekend. Um, so do you have a score prediction for that?
Um, Honestly, I think it's going to be a shootout just from watching a little bit of both these teams play this year. I would probably say something. I would hammer the over on this. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I think it's going to be a lot to a lot.
Yeah, I think BYU comes up on top here. BYU is just one of the most underrated teams in the among the NCAA right now. They did used to be ranked. They beat a ranked team in Arizona State early this year. And Washington State, I mean, they had a good comeback against Stanford after leading for a quarter, and then Stanford came back, and then they had to come back again. But that's just Cougar football.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you see when a coach gets fired or whatever, players will rally and they'll kind of come out and play better, but I don't see that happening this time around.
Yeah, I mean, Stanford isn't. They played Stanford last week. They're not really the most consistent team anyway. I mean, they beat Oregon, but that was we'll get to Oregon struggles in a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, but we never did a score prediction for Seattle and New Orleans for Monday night.
That game, I see it being something like 24-14 Saints, 24-17 Saints. I don't think the Seahawks are going to crack 20.
I think I think the Seahawks will crack 20, but I think the Saints are going to score more just
Hmm.
because I think they're a little bit more talented than Seattle right now. I say the Saints do reach to, I think it's going to be 28-20. So
Yeah, I
not
can see that.
little bit different from your prediction, but it's the Seahawks still can't come up on top in that game. All right, let's move on to from Pullman back to Seattle. We got University of Washington facing the winless University of Arizona. And there's a lot it's basically really bad team versus really bad team. And you, Duncan, you had a lot more notes than I did on this game. So you want to go over this?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this game. Like you said, it's bad team versus bad team, which I think is going to make it a good game if that makes sense. I'm sure if you follow college football at all, you know how awful Arizona is with injuries and such. They're currently down to their third string quarterback, and the only people left on the depth chart after that are two walk-ons. So they are really not good to say the least. They're right up there with Vanderbilt and Kansas for being one of the worst Power Five teams in the country this year. I don't know if you have any thoughts on them or you want me to talk about what I think about Washington.
Yeah, I can touch on University of Arizona right now. I mean, University of Arizona, they're like you said, they're one of the worst teams in NCAA. Which, I full disclosure, I go to Arizona State University, so don't have the I'm not a huge fan of the University of Arizona, to say the least, but it's really hard to watch this team after they were such a good football program really not too long ago. Um,
Yeah, I
and
remember
now,
conversations when they upset Oregon, that people thought
yeah,
they were going to make it, and now look at how far they've fallen.
yeah. And earlier this year, like it's become really sad in Tucson. Earlier this year, I forget which week it was. I think it was back in September. They tweeted out on Twitter that anybody could walk on. It's like, hey, we need bodies, and it like that's like I never wish that bad against a team I don't like. Like I never want to see them struggle to have players on the field. Like that's just sad.
It's
Like,
sad. Yeah. I know you won't spare them any crap, but I mean, I don't know how much more you can say about just how awful they've been this year.
no. And I honestly do hope University of Arizona gets back to being competitive again, because it'll make the territorial cup more fun to watch, even though
Mhm.
70-7 was really fun to watch. Um, but yeah, let's talk about UW, Duncan. What do you got on them?
So they started season ranked 20, lost to Montana, who's not even good for FCS. So they really have not lived up to expectations at all. I know it's hard to follow up after Legends, but I'm just not sure that Jimmy Lake is the guy who should be in charge of this program. It might be time just to give former 5-star recruit Sam Heward the reins. He only went 2 for 5 with 31 yards last week, but their current starter, Dylan Morris, is just not getting the job done. He's got a 60% completion percentage, which, especially in a conference like the Pac-12, is just not good enough. And they can't seem to get any type of consistency in the run game. They've been splitting carries all type of different ways. And I'm just honestly, I'm a little bit disappointed with how they played this year. They're always a team that I think is fun to root for, and it's been hard this year.
Yeah, I mean, again, full disclosure, my parents both went to Washington State University, so I don't show any sympathy to UW at all. But this UW team looks like a very, very, very disappointing Arizona State team, even though Arizona State has been disappointing in their own right. But because except the fact that Washington or University of Washington doesn't have a very mobile quarterback, like they really rely on the run game, and it's just been falling flat on their face so far this year.
I think part of it kind of has to be that we need to temper our expectations a little bit more. Last year they went, I want to say 3-1, but the year before that they were not good the year before either. So I think maybe we should stop ranking them coming into the season because they're just not the same team ever since Peterson retired.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's tough to follow up a legend, but we're not trying to tell them, hey, be like so and so. We want these players, these coaches to be like themselves and not put so much pressure because they're replacing a really good player or a really good coach.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that Jimmy Lake is going to stay longer with UW after this season, or do you think he's done?
I think they'll let him finish out this year. I think he gets kind of the benefit of the doubt because he was an in-house hire that he'll probably come back for next season. I think if he has a similar year next year, we can kind of start to talk about them moving on, but I think his job is safe for now.
Okay. And do you have a score prediction for UW versus U of A?
I'm going to say something like 31-20 Washington. I think it's going to be close, but not really. It's one of those games that I think Arizona might get a score too late and make it seem a lot closer than it really was.
Yeah, I don't have any like I don't have any trust in either of these teams. Just looking at
Mhm.
it with a like I think it's going to be more like 2017 Washington on top. I think like you said, Arizona's going to get a late score and make it seem closer than it was. But I just don't trust either of these defenses, but I don't trust either of these offenses either. Um, so unless UW can find some sort of consistency in this game, because U of A is really bad, um, I I think it's going to be. I don't think there's going to be a lot of offense.
Yeah, I would agree. But I think as bad as the offenses are, I think the defenses might be worse. So that's why my score prediction was a little bit higher than yours.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. We can just tell each other, "I told you so," next week. Next we got Oregon versus UCLA. This game is going to be on College Game Day. And Duncan, you put in the notes here that you think this is going to be the best game of the week.
Um, Partially because the rest of the schedule is really weak, but I think both these teams are really exciting, and this is definitely going to be a good game.
Yeah, so both of these teams have very talented rosters. I especially like DTR of UCLA. I had to I was doing pre-halftime and post-game shows when ASU played UCLA a couple of weeks ago, and it was really fun watching UCLA play in the first 2 quarters until ASU shut them out. But Oregon, they've been kind of disappointing lately.
I mean, it's hard when you beat a team like Ohio State so early in the season. You instantly move the expectations up like 3 levels, and if you don't kind of keep up to that same standard, people are going to be pissed. But yeah, since that game, they really have not like lived up to expectations at all. They only won 24-17 last weekend. I saw a lot of people on Twitter calling for Anthony Brown, the starting quarterback, to be benched, but I kind of think that's an overreaction. He really did not play as bad as a lot of people made him seem.
Yeah, I don't see any problems with Brown. I think sometimes it's the play calling that kind of loses or
Hmm.
that kind of loses their games, or not loses because they've only lost against Stanford this year. But it, I think the past couple of games they, have been taught basically all day. We've been talking about finding your identity, and when you're coming in like towards the very end of the season in the regular season, you kind of need to find that. And I think Oregon had that at the beginning of the year, and then after their loss to Stanford, it's been kind of okay. What the hell just happened?
Yeah, I think as bad as the rest of the Pac-12 is, they're probably still going to get lucky enough to win the division, but they really kind of need to figure it out and start pulling away from some of these teams who, in theory, are a lot worse than they are.
Yeah, especially since Oregon State has kind of fallen off, and Oregon State has a bye this week, so we won't be talking much about them. Because Oregon State, I believe they had the division lead for a little bit after Oregon lost to Stanford.
They did. There was like 1 week. It was like the first time they were in sole possession of first place in the division. I do think they play tomorrow night, though. I could be wrong.
Let me
But
double check so I don't look like an idiot. Um, Oregon State Beavers football. They do. They play tomorrow against Utah, and Utah literally just came off with a huge upset against Arizona State, scoring 28 unanswered points after ASU led 21-7 at the half. And Oregon State is coming off. Okay, they were the ones who gave up the lead to Washington State. My bad. I thought it was Stanford for a little bit. I guess I need to double check which team.
it's been a long week.
It has been a very long week. I haven't been getting enough sleep as I should. But we can talk a little bit about the Oregon State Utah game since I forgot to put it in the rundown. Wait, Oregon State had their bye last week. Okay, so it was Stanford. My bad. I am having brain fart here. Okay, so let's talk about Utah and Oregon State. What do you got with that game?
Just real quick. I think Utah's this is kind of more a story of Utah being disappointing than Oregon State being good. I think Oregon State will probably win this game, but I don't think they're great either.
No, I think Oregon State, they've kind of had a pretty easy schedule to start off the year. Because, I mean, you look at the teams they faced early in the year. I mean, they lost to a Purdue team that's now ranked 25, but then they faced Hawaii. They shut out Idaho. They upset USC, who has not been ranked since. They've beat a very bad Washington team by 3, and then they lost to Washington State the week after, and they've had a week to recuperate after that comeback loss against Oregon State, or that comeback loss against Washington State. But Utah, I mean, like I said earlier, they had a very surprising win against Arizona State. So I don't think it's too much to write them off, because Arizona State is one of the best in the Pac-12 South.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's either them, Utah, or UCLA right now for the Pac-12 South division.
Yeah, I'd agree.
But if Oregon somehow loses, University of Oregon, if they somehow lose another game, I mean, if Oregon State gets on another run, they have the possibility of winning that division as well.
Yep. I mean, you saw it last year when Oregon State upset them.
Yep.
It can be done.
It can be done. So what do you got? What's the score prediction you have for the UCLA Oregon game and the Oregon State Utah game?
So Oregon State Utah game, we'll finish up with that first. We can get back to the main event. But I think that'll be a game something like 35-28, 35-24 with Oregon State winning.
Okay, I kind of have a similar. I was going to go with more of a 35-28 as well. So you can take the 35-24 just so we can have some kind of difference.
It works for me.
But yeah, the main event, the college game day game, Oregon and UCLA. What do you got for that big game this weekend?
So like I said before, I think Anthony Brown is probably good enough. I think this Oregon defense, which is led by linebacker Noah Sewell, who was just named Pac-12 Freshman of the Week, is going to be good enough to slow down DTR. And I think last week Brown was good enough, going 20 for 28, 244 yards, no turnovers, which was a big thing. If he can put up another performance like that, I see Oregon winning this game.
Yeah, I definitely have Oregon winning this game. I think UCLA is talented. I think DTR is talented. But I think Oregon is just better. I think their defense is a lot better than anybody gives them credit for. Even though they had that like close win against Cal, who is the second worst team in the Pac-12 right now. I think that I think Oregon will come out on top. I think it's going to be 30-21. So keep that.
I said,
what's that?
34. I said I was just gonna get my prediction.
Oh, did you give your prediction? I just blanked
No,
out.
I didn't yet. I think it'll be 34-24. Maybe I did. I don't know. It's like you, it's been a long week, so I'm just trying to get to the end.
Yeah. We are almost going to wrap up here. We got hockey and then we got basketball next. So the Seattle Kraken made their debut right at tip-off against Vegas. It was a huge game. Seattle almost came back until Chandler Stevenson kicked the puck into the goal, the game-winning goal, past his former teammate Philip Grubauer. Stevenson and Grubauer won the 2018 Stanley Cup with the Washington Capitals. But Seattle only has one game won so far. They beat the Nashville Predators, and so far have been either getting destroyed. They lost 6-1 against Philadelphia not too long ago, or they're losing very close games, and there hasn't really been an in-between. They've been having defensive struggles. Their power play is kind of in the middle of the pack. But right now it's kind of the decision of, is Grubauer as good, has he been really worth it for the Seattle Kraken, the former Colorado Avalanche and Washington Capital backstop? Or do they stick with Joey Dackard, who right now he's played one start. He came up in the minors to replace Chris Dreger, who got injured in the Philadelphia game. Will Dackert, who has the .906 save percentage, will he be able to outplay Grubauer when Dreger comes back? Because Dreger does have starting. Grubauer and Dreger are both like certified starters in hockey right now. Right now, Dreger is out for 4 games total. But more on the offensive side, Brian Tanev and Jared McCann, who are 2 former Pittsburgh Penguins, they won a Stanley Cup together. McCann and Tanev both lead the team in goals. McCann just has 2 assists to make it 5 points total. So that's what's been going on in Seattle right now. They do have a Vancouver game tomorrow, is their home opener, and it could be a rivalry starting because Vancouver is not that far from Seattle. Really, you look at a map, it's southern Canada with kind of northern Washington and the Puget Sound area.
It almost feels kind of too perfect, and they're kind of the only 2 teams really out there. Hopefully, I'm hoping it's going to turn into a rivalry, but we kind of need both these teams to get good fast.
Yeah, and I mean, Seattle has a lot more potential than Vancouver does right now, because Vancouver has a lot of they have a lot of Arizona Coyotes players in that trade with Arizona that kind of dumped a bunch of players like Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Conor Garland. So Conor Garland is probably going to be the heart and soul of that Vancouver team, just like he was with the Arizona team. Right now, I expect Seattle to get better because that whole Pacific Division is wide open for the taking. They just need to find some sort of, again, they need to find some sort of identity, and they're a new franchise, and it's just something that they need to find their footing right now. They just have kind of been, it's kind of just been a slow start. I expect them to get better as the season goes along, as everybody else does, but they are a first-year franchise. There's a lot of pressure on them to be the next Vegas Golden Knights in making the playoffs in their first year. Even though the Golden Knights went to the Stanley Cup their first year and lost to the Capitals, it's just there's a lot of pressure on them to be like their other team in the Pacific Conference or Pacific Division.
Yeah, it's hard when you have a team like them who kind of sets the bar so high that especially like new hockey fans are coming like, oh, this team from Seattle should be pretty cool. I know the last expansion team was really good, and then they don't end up making it when the bar is literally making it to the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, you're just realistically not going to meet that in your first year.
Yeah, especially since the Stanley Cup Finals are kind of a crapshoot. Like you're placing the best teams in either conference, and again, with the Pacific Division wide open, it's kind of just like whoever wins that Pacific Division, I don't even think is going to get past the first round. But again, it's only been 5-6 games into the season. I expect, like I keep saying, Seattle is going to get better once they find some footing. I think once they find that chemistry, once they find that footing, I think they're going to get better.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on and touch on the Vancouver Canucks on the other side of the border. The Canucks, they looked very good against a winless Blackhawks team, despite losing to other really bad teams like the Sabres and the Red Wings. They only mustered 2 goals against the Buffalo Sabres and 1 goal against the Detroit Red Wings. And neither of those teams looked very good to begin with. But the Blackhawks, they, like I said, are winless, and Vancouver treated them like they were a winless team, winning 4-1 in last night's game. They're also having penalty kill struggles. They're kind of below average. They're not the worst, but they're definitely below average. I mentioned Conor Garland. He's finally getting some chances outside of Arizona. He has 2 goals and 4 assists for 6 points so far this year. That's about a point per game. And JT Miller, their center, is having a very strong start with the Canucks so far this year with 5 assists, 6 points, and a goal. So he's kind of been the guy who makes the offense happen. And if Miller isn't getting the chances to set up the goal or score one themselves, it's kind of just been not very fun if you're a Canucks fan to watch the rest of the game. I don't know if you want to add anything, Duncan. I know you're trying to get into hockey, but it's really difficult to get into hockey.
I can't say I know much about the Canucks. I know I just know they've just not been good for a long time. And I think, like I said, if they're good and the Kraken are good, that's going to be one of the better rivalries in all of hockey.
I think it's going to be a good rivalry regardless, just because they are kind of 2 middle of the road teams they got veteran presence, they got young guys, but they just need to, it'll be interesting. Tomorrow's game against the Nucks for the Kraken. I think it'll be fun to watch. 2 very similar teams. So keep an eye on them tomorrow. And finally, we got the Portland Trailblazers, who suffered a loss to the Sacramento Kings, 124-121. And Duncan, I know you have a lot of opinions on this team so far.
Yeah, so coming into the season, the kind of storyline was there's rumors that Damian Lillard wanted to trade out of Portland because he just seems to be a hopeless romantic. They don't seem to be doing a lot to build around him. And this game is definitely not how you want to start a season that many view as kind of essential to keeping Damian Lillard around. You just can't lose to the Sacramento Kings, like, period, if you have playoff aspirations. I know it's only 1 game, so bear with me. It might be a little bit of an overreaction, but to me, this Blazers team just did not look inspired at all. It didn't look like it looked like they were kind of just running around. They honestly didn't even play that terrible. But the second quarter, they just got terribly outscored. It was ugly. And to top it all off, Damian Lillard didn't even play all that well. This team really can only go as far as he does. He just needs to be better. And realistically, you can't expect him to be great for all 82 games. So they kind of need to figure something else out. It's probably an overreaction, but it might be time to kind of start rebuilding, tearing it all down. I don't see much here that makes me feel like they're going to be a top 4 seed in the West, which is what they're shooting for, because the past few years they've not been able to reach that plateau. So, like I said, if you want to keep Damian Lillard around and want him to be happy, this is not the way to do it. But at some point, you got to make a decision for yourself if it's worth it to keep him around or not. They don't have many assets. They made a lot of trades. Like, for instance, they acquired Larry Nance Jr. last season. He only had 2 points this game, which is just really disappointing. It's not good enough at all. So at some point, you have to ask yourself whether it's worth it or not to just keep running it back. They're a lot like the Seahawks are right now. They've got their 1 star. Every year they try to change things up a little bit to make the team around them better, and it has not worked. They've not really been able to figure out the right formula to making Damian Lillard kind of the superstar. It's going to be a question now of if he can be the best player on a championship winning team.
Yeah, and it's not like Damian Lillard is getting worse, at least so far. It's only been 1 game. But this is the same team that lost all of its preseason games. And you don't want that. But I will say that last year, the Phoenix Suns lost all of their preseason games, and then they lost the first game of the season, and then they went on to go to the finals. I know that Phoenix team had a lot more talent, but something may happen. It's not too late to count them out.
I mean, yeah, obviously we're only 1 game in, and I'm kind of drawing a lot of conclusions that you probably can't draw yet. But I just think this game is kind of representative as a whole. They're just kind of been mediocre to a fault, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and when you're giving up 124 points to the Sacramento Kings of all teams, it doesn't look good, especially when like the Western Conference is as competitive as it is, with the Golden State Warriors having a really strong start. You still have the LA Lakers, who, even though they dropped their first game, they're still going to be competitive. The aforementioned Phoenix Suns are going to be competitive. The Denver Nuggets have the MVP. If the Trailblazers want to get better, I agree with you. They need to tear it all down and build from the ground up. Kind of like how the Nationals and Cubs did in baseball, how the Coyotes did in hockey. We don't really see that a lot in the NBA or in the NFL, except maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars after the 2017 season. But who knows? I think it's going to be a rough year for the Portland Trailblazers. I think they'll still win some games. I still think they're going to win over 30 games, though.
Yeah, I'd agree. They're probably good enough to make the playoffs, but again, at some point you got to just figure out where your priorities as a franchise are, because they can keep doing this for the next 5 years, but at some point it's just not going to be worth it to keep Dame around.
Yeah, and even though Lillard keeps saying that he wants to stay in Portland, it really is up to the front office. And I know the front office doesn't want to trade Damian Lillard because he gets the butts in the seats. But maybe you can get his stock value is still really high. You can get pretty much what the Philadelphia 76ers are asking for Ben Simmons for Damian Lillard.
Yeah, I would agree. If they're going to trade him now, it's probably, you obviously want to wait till a little bit later in the season to see how things really go. But this season is probably, I would say, is where his peak value is going to be. I don't see it going up anymore after this season.
Yeah, and we're not even close to the trade deadline in the NBA, because the season literally just started. But the Trailblazers are just going to be mediocre to watch just because of how competitive the West is going to be, just like the West was last year. And it's not like the Trailblazers were bad last year. They just they just seemed more of a team that kind of just sneaks in.
Mm-hmm.
And they've been kind of doing that in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
For the Trailblazers, let me look up their schedule right now, just
They're
so.
playing the Suns Saturday, which should be a good opportunity.
Yes, they play the Suns. Next game tomorrow. They got the Clippers on Monday, and they got the Grizzlies on Wednesday. All teams with good talent. The Grizzlies, of course, are a much younger team than the Clippers and the Suns are. And I can see them winning. They can either lose all 3 games or they can win 2 out of 3. I don't think they're going to win all 3 of those games, just because of how talented the Suns and Grizzlies are right now. I think the Grizzlies are a team you have to keep an eye on this year. So.
Yeah, I can honestly see him going 0 for 3 and not batting an eye at that.
Yeah, they still don't have a win this year. I'm not sure if I don't expect them to go winless this year, of course, because that's physically impossible. Unless, nothing's impossible, but it would be
it's
insane
not
if that
likely.
happens. But, it's just going to be a tough year for them, and I feel bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got, I'm just looking at this roster. This team construction is just really poor, in my opinion. They've got a lot of dudes like Norm Powell and Robert Covington who kind of fill the same role, which is what I think they thought getting these 3-and-D guys was going to help make Dame look better, which granted it has, but again, you go back to, is he good enough to be the best player on a championship winning team?
Yeah, and I think wherever he goes, if he does get traded to a contender, he'll be able, he's been carrying the Trailblazers throughout his entire career. He can if he goes to a good team, I'm not sure what team that is, because again, it's so early in the year. You can pretty much guarantee that it'll be good for him to get the load off so that he can, like, maybe if the Nets trade Kyrie Irving, that he could be a piece that the Nets want to bring to Brooklyn. I mean, that's just something I just thought of off the top of my head, but
Yeah, I would say I would agree. I can see a situation like potentially Denver giving up maybe Jamal Murray and a couple of firsts. But I think I agree. I think he needs to go to a place where he doesn't have to have 100% of the pressure on him 100% of the time.
yeah. And I mean, he's good under pressure. I think there's so many countless buzzer beaters that he's
We should have a
had.
whole podcast of just Damian Lillard clutch moments. So
This is the Damian Lillard podcast now. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up pretty soon. Is there a game that we should be keeping an eye on this weekend before our next show on Friday?
Like I said, I'm really looking forward to watching this Oregon UCLA game. I think it's going to be good. Hopefully, at least this is what I'm hoping. I think Oregon's probably overranked a little bit. UCLA is probably still a little bit underranked. So I'm just looking forward. I'm hoping the Pac-12 shows up when the whole college football world is going to be looking at them this weekend.
Yes. And even though ASU is not playing this weekend, ASU is going to be playing Washington State for their homecoming game on the 30th, which is going to be really exciting. That's going to be a rivalry between my parents and I, even though I'll be in the student section. I think the game I'm going to be looking at this week is going to be the Vancouver Canucks and the Seattle Kraken. Even though the Kraken and Canucks have been struggling this year, I think this is going to be the game to decide where either team is going to be going. I think it's going to be Philip Grubauer game to start tomorrow. And I think after his last game, I forget who it was against, but he allowed only one goal in that game after not doing too well. I think he'll be able to bounce back from his slow start. I think the Kraken are going to match up well against the Canucks this weekend. So keep an eye on them. It's the first game of a rivalry in the Pacific Northwest in hockey.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for a cup of coffee here in the Pacific Northwest. My name is Jake Brown, and I'm here with Duncan Irvine, and that will be it for today. See you next week.